in this station, we will talk about the contents of the axilla. We will start by the axillary artery, the axillary vein, and then see the brachial plexus in the next station. First, let's have some orientation. This is the neck of the cadaver. This is the anterior thoracic wall. This is the medial thoracic wall, and this is our upper limb. This is the shoulder. Okay. Again, let's reflect the anterior border, which is the pectoralis major and pectoralis minor. As you can see here, there are two vessels. This one is the axillary artery, and this one is the axillary vein. Okay. The axillary artery is the main blood supply to the upper limb. It commences at the outer border of the first strip. If this is the first strip, if this is the first strip, in its outer border, here in the mid-clavicular point, commences the axillary artery. The axillary artery is the continuation of the subclavian artery. So, this is our axillary artery. The axillary artery, for descriptive purposes, is divided into three parts by the pectoralis minor muscle. So, this is the pectoralis minor in the anatomical position. Above the pectoralis minor is the first part of the axillary vein. Behind the pectoralis minor is the second part, and below the pectoralis minor is the third part. The axillary artery ends at the lower border of teres major muscle, from which it becomes the brachial artery. Okay. So, the axillary artery is a continuation of the subclavian at the outer border of the first strip and continues until the lower border of teres major to become the brachial artery. Let's talk about the first part. The first part, as we said, is the part above the pectoralis minor. It has got only one branch called the superior thoracic artery. The superior thoracic artery gives blood supply to pectoralis muscles. Okay. It lies above, this one lies above the pectoralis minor muscle. The second part, which lies behind the pectoralis minor, has got two branches. The first one lies in the upper surface of the pectoralis minor, is called the thoracoacromial trunk. As you can see, it is one trunk that immediately bifurcates into four branches. For example, this is one branch, this is another branch, and this is a third branch. The branches of the thoracoacromial give blood supply to the pectoralis muscles and the deltoid muscle, and it gives blood supply to the clavicle and to the acromion. So, two bones, the clavicle and the acromion, and two muscles, the pectoralis and the deltoid. So, this is our first branch in the second part, which is called the thoracoacromial. The second branch, which is found in the lower boundary of the pectoralis minor muscle, which is this one. This is the lateral thoracic artery. Okay. The lateral thoracic artery supplies the serratus anterior pectoralis muscle, and in the female it supply the breast. Okay. So, this is the lateral thoracic. For the third part of the axillary, we will shift to the next cadaver because it is more clear there. Regarding the branches of the third part of the axillary artery, to expose the artery, this is the anterior wall, pectoralis major and pectoralis minor. The part of the artery below the pectoralis minor is the third part of the axillary. As you can see here, the axillary artery has got a relation with the axillary vein and the branches of the brachial plexus. To see the branches of the third part, this is our third part, and this is the first branch, this one. It is called the subscapular artery. The subscapular artery, after a short while, it gives this branch, which is the circumflex scapular, and it then continues downward. So the subscapular artery gives the circumflex scapular and then changes its name into thoracodorsal artery, which supply the latissimus dorsi muscle. So this is our first branch, which is the subscapular, artery. The second two branches are the anterior and posterior circumflex humeral arteries. The anterior circumflex humeral passes behind this muscle, which is coracobrachialis, and the long head of the biceps, to supply the shoulder. The posterior circumflex humeral passes into this space, which is called the quadrangular space. The quadrangular space lies between teres major muscle and teres minor muscle superiorly. The lateral head of the triceps medially and the humerus medially. So this is the quadrangular space in which passes the posterior circumflex humeral artery with accompanying the axillary nerve. The posterior circumflex humeral give blood supply to the teres major, the deltoid, and the long and lateral head of the triceps. Now let's move to the axillary vein. As we said, it has got an anteromedial relation to the artery. The axillary vein commences at the lower border of teres major as a continuation of this vein, which is the basilic vein. So the basilic vein in the lower arm at the lower border of the teres major becomes the axillary vein. The axillary vein immediately receive the venae committents of the brachial artery, and at the outer border of the first strip it receives the cephalic vein. Also it has got tributaries resembling the branches of the axillary artery draining into the axillary vein. The axillary vein enters the root of the neck anterior to a muscle called scalenus anterior. That's all for the axillary artery and the axillary vein. Regarding relations of the axillary artery, in the first part, the cords of the brachial plexus is as follows. The lateral cord and the posterior cord are superolateral, while the medial cord is immediately posterior. Okay, this is in the first part. In the second part, the relation as the name of the cord indicates. So the lateral cord is lateral, the medial cord is medial, and the posterior cord is posteriorly. And the axillary vein is always anteromedial to the artery.